May I raise the first question to Stephen? Well, what are the, well, I like all your suggestions. But what are the key challenges, based on your experience in China, to implement these best practices in those super tall building projects? And, well, driving change is always very difficult. And are there any ways that you would suggest to which can accelerate the implementation of these best practices?
Yeah, I think the challenges, I think we mentioned just now, in China for the last 20 years, it's been rapidly growth with the buildings like these super tall buildings, really complicated for constructions and management and a lot of things. So the key is the people as well. We've experienced a lot of shortage of experienced staff to help out to do the work, and with the growth, so all these experienced staff will be scattered by different organizations, like too many developers now. So that's a big challenge. And then the local design institute, I mentioned quite a lot because traditionally they include architecture, structural engineer, mechanical and electrical engineers. They're all in one house. Even the quantity surveyors, even the cost control guys. So it's very difficult, or it needs a lot longer time to try to establish independently what they can do. That's why I mentioned a lot of the specifications. I think Brian will understand, the specification is not easy to write, and you need very experienced people. I think that's the challenges, but I know the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Department in China now has set a goal to set up a cost model or management model by 2020. So I think by doing that, they would like to invite more institutions from over the world, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, UK, USA, just to put together, maybe hold more joint conferences, joint research, so that you can implement or communicate with the Chinese government to help to accelerate this process. I think that could be done.
How long do you think that would take?
Oh, well, for the last 20, 30 years, China's been very fast. It's learned a lot, and it's been actually, on the cost side, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, the Hong Kong Institute surveyors, we helped to set up the China government to set up the China cost engineering institution, and they are working very well, and they are now joining the Pacific Ocean of all the quantity surveying institutes. So that's already communicating a lot. I would say, I can't say how long, but the things will be getting better and better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. The other question I would like to raise for Jason. Your research project investigates the economic and political determinants of super tall building development in China and their various findings. How do you see this phenomenon in China versus, say, mature market like US or Europe?
So, there might be a few ways to answer the question, but I just finished a book on New York City. So, yes. So there's two issues to compare New York City to China, for example. Well, number one is, like I said, the New York City government, New York state government, and even the federal government, for that matter, really do not want to participate in encouraging skyscrapers. Okay. In fact, there's a mixed mind about whether they should be promoted or limited. So politically speaking, it is not in their political interest to be involved. Here, in some sense, it's the opposite. the political motivations or the professional, the governmental motivations are quite strong. And there's also, it seems to me, from what I can tell, a much greater tolerance among the public for these large-scale active projects here. So I think that gets to the heart of your question. So the other thing too is mature market. As China transitions, as it grows rapidly, at some point, I don't know whether it's going to be 15 years, 25 years, or 30 years. I suspect it's going to look a lot like New York, where the growth is just a lot slower. I mean, one thing, if you look at the number of new tall office buildings projected in the next 10 or 15 years is the projection for the growth rate is highly correlated with the projected growth of financial sectors. New York as a financial sector is not growing nearly as rapidly as new emerging financial sectors. So maybe that takes 10, 15, maybe it takes 25 years for that to happen, but you will see a convergence in several decades.
The last question from me is for Brian. How has the contemporary elevator technology changed typical program stacks in super tall tower, and what economic opportunities do these changes present?
Yeah, I think I spoke a little bit about, in the particular project I was showing, the inversion of the hotel lobby being all the way at the top of the tower, and one of the reasons that's even feasible is elevator technology. You've seen in the contemporary Chinese buildings, elevators just go extremely fast. Your ears are popping. And actually, there were some interesting presentations even just yesterday on some of the kind of crazy new technologies. And the things you have to think about as you go taller and taller. For example, there was a presentation on carbon fiber elevator cables, because now the cables are getting too long to be made with steel, right? Yes. So it's crazy. But that's only part of it, and that's a technologically solvable problem. I think really the other things to consider is what I mentioned about, first of all, this kind of sector or programmatic blur, and kind of getting away from not only the kind of striations of the program stack, but also the striations of the actual floor levels. And again, thinking about how do we really engage vertically beyond just kind of the circulation up and down on the elevator. And that's partly, I'm doing a lot of kind of, with the computational approach and parametric design, we see some opportunities there formally through the language of the iconic tower to maybe start to kind of creatively tackle that through new types of spaces. So I think the elevator, that's a given, and there's high value to that, but I think we need to push kind of into other aspects of high-rise design to really take advantage of that.
Thank you. One more question for you, Stephen. If, say, in China, for those super tall building projects, the developer is willing to implement the best practice, what would be the kind of benefit, saving? Because the best way to convince the developer to adopt best practice is the financial benefit, right? So based on experience, any kind of indication that if you use this best practice, what would be the financial benefit? Put aside the other factors.
Well, you can't put aside the factors, but these are the questions that we always asked by developers. If we employ you, if you have that cost management system, how much can you save for me? We've done so throughout the years. We've done some statistics on this, and I would say, quite confidently, that we can save at least 5 to 8%.
Wow.
Yes, on the development. That's why we've been quite successful, and people and developers really need, because we are not just cost saving. We are helping them to put together the whole system.
Yes, a healthy
a must system to do a complicated building, coordinate with all the consultants, and because we have to do all the tenders, all contracts. You may have 100 packages, lift, escalator, electricity, a lot of things, but how to put it together to get a better cost control now, that's a very difficult task. We find it still difficult as well.
Yeah,
so I would say 5 to 8% of that. I'll be comfortable.
Very attractive savings and product.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Brian, I have a question for you. I find your type of work very fascinating, and I really enjoyed your presentation. my question is, what is, as the technology evolves more and we get more tools that we can do some of the really fascinating stuff that you do, what is the role of someone like you in the design process? And talk about your input in the overall design. Are you finding that someone like you can influence the overall design even more than perhaps some others, because you can use tools to help the designers, whether it's massing or anything else? I mean,
I do think, yes, there's a lot of opportunity for that, but I'm often hesitant to say that, I consider myself a designer even though I'm a specialist. For me, that's just kind of the contemporary tool set, and I'm taking advantage of that. However, on the same time, I don't totally buy into the idea that all designers will be like me someday, that everyone will be applying this technology. I think that everyone can understand this way of thinking, that this is a new lens of viewing buildings, but I wouldn't want that to be at the expense of devaluing all of the other expanses of expertise that are required to deliver a project like this. So the way I see my goal is to just kind of say, okay, what's the bleeding edge, and kind of find that and find how that provides value to projects, but then to integrate that in such a way that it's accessible by all types of designers and stakeholders. So, even the example of the virtual reality, I'm not going to bring developers in and train them how to code custom software or use parametric design. I'm going to, cook something up for them in virtual reality and let them play around with it in a way that's totally natural and intuitive to them. Because really what I'm looking for is then their feedback and direction, because they have a totally separate set of kind of expertise and value to add to the project.
thank you.
To Mr. Lai, because in my project, there's a big problem is that the main contractor always use the deadline let's see like this. When there is some quantity problem, and the contractor using the schedule will be delayed, and the deadline will be extended the deadline, and because of that, our clients finally make a compromise with the main contract. Is there any good solution for this? Because as I know, our clients only have one way, one tool. That's fine. Fine. You mean 罚款? Okay, that's the only way they can do. But there is no other way. So I noticed that many detail not very good, and the quality being harmed because of the deadline. Because our clients has supervisor, maybe our clients is government, they have supervisor. The deadline cannot be extended.
Well, may I understand your question? Is that because the quantities are not quite accurate, and your deadline is very close, and you have
Yes.
Yeah.
They make compromise.
Yeah, and then really bargaining with the client, have to pay the money in order to do the work. I think that's why it's all rooted back to the original tender. That if you've got a very good tender in the pre-tender stage, let's say when you award the contract, everything is in detail and work out on the quantities. So the accuracy on that won't change a lot. Okay, they can order, the contractor can order those reinforcement or material based on that quantity. It's fairly correct, accurate. And then they don't have a problem of, delaying and all that. So it's all emphasized on all the management side to how each tender should be done and should have all the detailed specifications in place before you really ordered. But that's the common problems in China, is that the time is too short. They want to start the project straight away. But there is another way to deal with that, is to have what we say just now, the remeasurement contract, okay? We tender based on certain quantities. They may not write, okay? They're just rough estimate of the work, of the materials. But you bound, when the contract come back, you bound them, the contractors on the rate. So even when the quantities increase or decrease, you just times the rate. And that is a contract rate. And that's a fair and is a reasonable cost and competitive rate that you can, so that you won't be lose out or gain anything.